The Torah portion this week is the portion of Chayei Sara, the life of Sarah, and it really talks about her passing away and how she lived till 127 years. Abraham bought a plot in the city of Hebron, Kiryat Arba, and it's called the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, the cave, the doubled cave. And the Torah also talks about finding a wife for Yitzchak and how Yitzchak is going to finally get married. He's, at this time, he's approximately 40 years old. And we just read about the Akedas Yitzchak, where Isaac was brought as a sacrifice. We just read about that the end of last week's Torah portion. And so Abraham thinks to himself, he says, well, if I ended up slaughtering Isaac, there would be no future. So what I really should do now that I realize miraculously Isaac is still with us, he wasn't slaughtered as a sacrifice. So let me get him married now. At least there's potential for Jewish grandchildren and continuity, the future. Nachas, real nachas. So that's really what the Torah discusses. And Rabbi Sacks, Olav Hashalom, who just passed away, he wrote an article for this week already. He had written it. And so luckily we're lucky to have this. And Rabbi Sacks discusses the Torah portion, the way it emphasizes certain things and it seems to leave out other things. And Rabbi Sacks compares this Torah portion a little with last week's Torah portion. And it really gives us an idea of what is the purpose, what is the main lesson for us to learn from these stories that we read about. And so Rabbi Sacks has his beautiful, innovative message, and we shall discuss that. So he starts off with a interview of a member of the House of Lords in England who had reached the age of 92, and he was going very strong. And they interviewed him and they said, when people reach the age of 92, normally people slow down and you seem to be speeding up. And so he answered them very wisely. He said, when you reach the age of 92, you start seeing the door begin to close and you want to accomplish everything before it's too late. And so he said, I have a lot of work to do and I've got to speed up. And that was this interview of a 92-year-old member of the House of Lords. So Rabbi Sacks then connects that with the Torah portion, where Sarah passes away at the age of 127, and Abraham is 10 years older than her, so he's 137. And what is he doing at the age of 137? He doesn't seem to be taking it easy. He's not going on vacations. He's going stronger than ever. And the issue that Rabbi Sacks finds surprising is, why does the Torah dwell and concentrate and put so much of the details in the story of Abraham buying a little piece of land to bury his wife. There's obviously numerous stories in the Torah that happened that we don't read about. In other words, they happen to the biblical figures. We don't find out about how they purchased breakfast. We don't find out about if they ever ate in restaurants. Very little is discussed about their going to any shows or, different, sport events. We don't really find much, if his wife went to a hairdresser or nothing really, manicure, pedicure, none of this stuff really seems to be mentioned. But we do find that it doesn't talk about his fundraising efforts either, or however else he was able to keep himself afloat. But what it does talk about is, and it gives a huge account about his purchase of this plot of land. And it says it brings down the whole dialogue. That Abraham says, I am an immigrant and a resident amongst you, which means that he knows he has no right to buy land, and it will take a special concession on their part for him to do so. And the Hittites politely but firmly try to discourage him. And they tell him, you have no need to buy a burial plot because we will let you bury your dead, and we're not going to deny you a little plot. And he can basically bury Sarah in someone else's graveyard. That's really what's going on here, the way Rabbi Sacks is understanding it. It seems like what Rabbi Sacks is saying is not exactly the way I understood it, but the way Rabbi Sacks is understanding the story is that the residents don't want to sell a plot of land to an outsider, and they don't want to give him a plot of land or sell him a plot of land, but they will allow him to bury his dead in their land. If you want, we'll give you we'll let you have a little location to bury your dead, but we're not giving the land to you. You could just, you just need a place for burial. No problem here. We consider you a very honorable figure, and we're going to let you bury your wife in our backyard. So you choose whose backyard you want. It'll be deep down under the ground. It won't interfere with our whatever else we do there. And we're going to let you bury your dead in our land. And that's the way Rabbi Sacks sees it that way. I don't know. Did all of you understand the story that way? Because I actually didn't read it that way. I always understood it that they were being very nice and generous, and they wanted to give him a piece of land that he could keep. And Abraham said, no, I don't want your land. I want to pay for a piece of land. I don't want you to give it to me. I want to buy it. I think that's the simple understanding. But Rabbi Sacks seems to be taking a little a different approach, and he's understanding it that they really don't. They really they look at this as it's part of their tribe's land. They're not giving it to. They're not going to let anyone else buy into it. This is part of their group. From their group, they can't let anyone buy into their land. They want to stay together. They're not interested in any outsiders.
Rabbi Smith?
Yeah.
So my takeaway from that parsha is that that the residents were willing to give him a license to bury Sarah, but not ownership. That means they could have revoked it. They could have used it for something else, but he didn't have rights other than what they specifically told him. And this is not what he wanted. He wanted a connection. My takeaway is that he wanted a connection to Adam and Hava, who are by Masorah, we consider them to also be buried in the same spot. And he wanted this for his for his people, for those that follow him. So we would have a claim of ownership for that land.
So do you understand it that they wanted to give
Yerusha
him?
is what I was thinking of the word, a Yerusha. They wanted as you would in a will, to be willed to as an inheritance for the for succeeding generations, even the rights to visit.
So you understood that they wanted to give it to him, but only certain
No,
rights?
they wanted it, they were doing it on a limited basis. It was a license as opposed to ownership.
Could they have asked him to remove his dead like after a few years? That's the way you understood it?
They're the residents, and if he had no rights, the owner that is not, the person that is not giving up ownership has a right to do with the land as he pleases.
Right. So you understood it like Rabbi Sacks. So even when they were giving it, they weren't giving the full rights. They were just giving the right for one burial plot, and that's it. And it's a one-time deal. And
but it's not an irrevocable right.
Right. Right.
They could do whatever they want.
Wow. So you understood it like Rabbi Sacks.
No.
Very nice.
I think.
One second.
Rabbi,
Manny, so 1 second, Ben. Manny, so does that how you think Rabbi Sacks understood it from the way I read it?
No, I mean, based on what you're saying, I don't think he said that.
What I said was I don't understand it that way, but Rabbi Sacks seems to think that he was offering for them to bury, to bury Sarah in their backyard, meaning it's basically for use. He could use it for this purpose, and that's it. And it's a one-time deal, and you're not going to own much.
It's less than ownership. It's revocable.
Well, that's the way Rabbi Sacks seems to think. It's
revocable by the owners.
So he's renting.
I'm just trying to see if that's the way Rabbi Sacks seems to be wording it. 1 second, let me look at the way he writes it.
They're renting it to him.
Well, renting, but without money.
No.
Well, that's an important part too, because under common law, I mean, obviously it's not common law that they were using there, but there was no exchange of value for the right, so it was all unilateral. And I would think that the same thing might apply in halacha, because it wasn't paid for, so there is no permanency attached to it. To the
Rabbi.
Right. Well, I mean, the truth is that a gift it should be valid just like a sale. I mean,
but they weren't truly gifting it.
Right.
They were giving a right.
Right.
They're giving a license to bury Sarah, which could have been revoked by the owner.
Right. So that's the way I think Rabbi Sacks writes it. He says he has no need to buy a burial plot. No one among us will deny you his burial site to bury your dead. He can bury Sarah in someone else's graveyard. Equally,
Rabbi.
It sounds like he's similar to what you're saying, which is nice. I mean, I didn't see it that way, but that's definitely interesting. Ben, you wanted to say something. Ben?
Yeah, I wanted to say that originally that's the way the Hittite sounded. But when he heard the price and Abraham insisted on buying and offered the big price, then the deal was different. He actually bought it.
Yeah, we're not dealing with what happened afterwards. We're dealing before. So before you understood it that he's not giving it to him. He's not giving him a piece of land. he was offering him just a right to bury, but not, he wasn't going to give him a gift. Right. Uh-huh.
That was the original offer. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. David Greenberg. Yeah. I can't hear you.
Rabbi.
Well, 1 second, Reb Tuvia. David is trying to say something here, and we can't hear him. We don't hear you. Something's wrong with your mic, I guess. I don't know. All right, when you're able to get it working, we'll come back to you. Miranda.
Yeah, Rabbi, I was wondering, maybe he wanted to purchase the land because of the different burial traditions. You know how there are different burial traditions in different cultures.
Right.
If he couldn't own the property, then there would be a mixture of different essences or something going on, or not have the ability to protect the grave in the future, something like that.
Uh-huh. Or maybe they wouldn't let him do the rituals during the burial because they would consider it against their faith, maybe.
Whatever they do.
Or long-term issues, right? And Reb Tuvia, you wanted to say something.
Yes. Anyway, when I was a kid, I was taught that he wanted to bury Sarah, and they wanted to get a piece of land, and the chieftain, whatever the guy was, the Arab over there, said, "I'll give you for free." And he said, "No, I don't want it for free. I'll pay for it, but I want that piece of land." He said, "I'll give you for free." As Abraham said, "No, listen, I can pay you with," those days was no money, was with goats and lamb and sheep and chicken. He gave him so much money. He said, "This is my piece of land." He says, "Yes, you own it." That's the way I was taught. Now, maybe I was wrong, maybe,
Right.
But that's the way I was. He bought that piece of land from the, I don't know, the Muslim chieftain, whatever you want to call him over there. He bought it from, and he had a piece of property that was his property. He buried his wife.
Right. So in other words, he could have gotten the same property for free, but he wanted to pay instead of getting it for free.
He didn't want it for free, be obligated. He said, "No, I want to pay you, and I'll pay you good because I want to marry my wife." Whatever the reason was, he wanted that piece of property.
But why did he not take it for free? Why didn't he take it for free?
Well, he didn't want it for free, and he get kicked out later on. So he said, I bought it fair and square, and it's mine."
Right.
So
well, that's a little vague what that means, because what does it mean you get kicked out if you buy it, if you take it for free? It could mean, that the other person is going to have strings attached unofficially, or it could mean officially. In other words, it could mean that he's deep down, he's going to feel you're obligated to him. And so he's expecting favors in return, or you're going to feel guilty that you owe him, but legally you own it. Or it could mean that he physically has the right to kick you out. In other words, it's a little vague even when you're saying this. It's a little vague what you mean. Do you really mean he can kick you out legally, or do you mean he can kick you out in theory because you're a recipient of his kindness, and some people they have strings attached to all their kindnesses, and they don't tell you about the strings. But ultimately, they make you feel that there are strings attached later, and they treat you like you're a taker, and they end up making life miserable for you. So that it is a little vague, I guess. Even when you say how you want to, how you remember it. It's a little vague how you're saying it. Naomi, yes.
Rabbi.
Naomi. No, 1 second, Loretta. Naomi.
Rabbi and group, could Abraham have thought that maybe her grave would be desecrated or destroyed in some way?
Yeah, so that's
he did not own the property. It's like a co-op,
Right.
You don't
along the lines of Miranda and Manny, we're basically emphasizing that idea. Yeah. Okay. And David, does your machine work? Let's hear it. We can't hear you.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, Loretta. What did you want to say, Loretta?
Well, Abraham
had to pay for the land, because in all his dealings with Hashem, he was told he would have a great nation. So he had spiritual foresight to see one day somebody would say, you don't own the land. And he would say, yes, I did. I paid 400 shekels and here's the deed.
Right.
So he was standing on his own 2 feet. He didn't want any gifts from anybody because this was the future for the Jewish people. And it so happened, it happened. The Arab said, you don't own the land. He said, yes, we do.
Right.
It's in the Torah.
What that means is that, you know, there is a concept of having a contract even for a gift. So he could have had it given to him as a gift and having them write a contract. There is such a
that was not
it
that wasn't good enough to Abraham.
A valid contract. But even so, we know that when you pay money for something, it does create much more of a clarity that it's yours than, you know, than even a contract that says he gave it to you as a gift. The fact that there's a proof that there was money paid, you know, so that would be, according to the way you're understanding it, Loretta, he was offered exactly the same option for a gift. And he said, no, I want exactly that, but I want to pay for it, because this way he won't feel obligated to him, or it'll be much harder for anyone to create to start any protest against what happened, because we have a contract that said it was actually sold and I gave you the money.
That's correct.
You know, so it definitely is more of a concrete type of a acquisition when it's sold with money. Yeah, last try, David. Let's see if we can hear you. Still can't. Okay, after the class, maybe we'll try to figure out what's wrong with that microphone. Okay, so let's continue with Rabbi Sacks's insight. So Rabbi Sacks is going along these lines, and what's surprising is that the dialogue is at such length. The purchase of the cave of Machpelah is evidently, he says, quite a important event, because it's mentioned not just here, but 3 times. And then he gives an example when Jacob is on his deathbed, and he asks, he tells his sons where he wants to be buried. And he says, bury me with my fathers in the cave of the Ephron, the Hittite, the cave of the field of Machpelah. Listen to the length of this these statements. The cave, the field of Ephron, the Hittite, the cave of the field of Machpelah near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field as a burial place from the Ephron the Hittite. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. I'm going to mute everyone. I think maybe people, there might be too much noise. So the field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. And so look at all those verses and look at how many times he repeats this, that it was bought from Ephron and where it is and who's buried there. And it's quite quite lengthy. And this is right after he blessed all of his children, all the tribes, the 12 tribes, and he was giving his last words to them. And this is what he said. So it seems very surprising that we put such importance on all of these details. Exactly where it is, who Abraham bought it from. Now, right after the story of this purchase in this week's Parsha, what do we find? It says, Avraham is old. Oh, David, thank you. I just see in the chat, I'm not so savvy with these things, but I just see David Greenberg wrote that in 1946, Ben-Gurion was brought before the Peel Commission and asked to prove why Palestine belongs to the Jews. And Ben-Gurion submitted the Abraham story for owning the site. That's very interesting. Thank you for bringing that up. Very interesting. That as Ben-Gurion was in no way, I don't think, no shape or form was he too religious, but yet this came quite handy for him in proving that the land of Israel, at least Hebron, belongs to the Jewish people. We actually paid for it. So I guess what's also beneficial, and this might sound funny, but if you imagine how much he paid then, and if they do want to claim that they should get it back from us, they'll have to pay interest on that money for 3,500 years. I mean, I can imagine that might be quite a sum of money, And so anyway, but that's just a little thought. But in any event, the question that Rabbi Sacks has is that it's mentioned 3 times or 4 times, and each time, and even one of them, it elaborates again completely on this story. What is it trying to tell us? And then if we have the statement in the Torah about Abraham was old, well advanced in his years, and Hashem blessed Abraham with everything. Sounds like the end of his life. But it's actually just beginning. Some things are just beginning. This is new initiatives are about to happen. And what are those? Well, first thing is, as I mentioned in my introduction, that Abraham is about to look for a wife, arrange for his servant to look for a wife for Isaac. So it just mentions how old he is. You'd think he's about to retire completely and just enjoy life in Boca Raton and just relax. And yet he's not satisfied with relaxing. He's starting to figure out how he's going to get his son married. His son is already 37 years old, and he actually is about 40 at the time of Isaac's marriage. So somewhere between the 37 and 40 mark that he's sending Eliezer to closer to the 40 mark. He's sending Eliezer to find his son Isaac a wife. And
37 was the Akedah, right?
I didn't hear the first words. I heard Akedah. What did you say before that?
37 was the at age 37 was the Akedah.
Yes, that is correct, Jerry. Yes, you're right. And so Abraham is sending Eliezer to go find his wife, and he sends him to his land, his native land, and this takes up, I must say, a huge portion of a huge part of the Torah portion. And Rabbi Sacks sees both of these stories quite lengthy. The story of the purchase and the story of the finding a wife. Every conversation is mentioned, the thoughts, the feelings, and this is in contrast to last week's Torah portion. Because think about last week's Torah portion. What do you have in last week's Torah portion? You have the binding of Isaac, where Isaac is brought as a sacrifice. Well, we don't know what really Isaac is thinking. We don't know what Abraham was thinking the whole time, different thoughts that went through his head. It doesn't really tell us all the details, but here we've got everything. And so that is really what Rabbi Sacks is bothered with. It's quite a contrast. Here we've got the story repeated twice. The story of Eliezer finding a wife for Isaac. It really goes through all of his thoughts he says to things that he said to himself. He made certain promises and he made some deal, so to speak, with Hashem, in his mind. And sure enough, how it developed and how he repeated the story. So it's really it's really surprising to see such a difference in the way the Torah discusses. In fact, the Talmud says, the discussions of the servants of the patriarchs is more pleasuresome, is better than the Torah, the teachings of their children. Meaning that there's many places in the Torah where the Torah is so concise. In the year, the Torah is so elaborate, and it's only about the servant of the patriarchs, not even about the patriarchs. And so the Talmud says, you see how Hashem loves even the servants of the patriarchs is greater than all the Torah teachings. In any event, Rabbi Sacks says the explanation is simple. It's interesting, at one of the eulogies for Rabbi Sacks, his daughter gave a eulogy, and one of the things she mentioned was that she never heard from her father, she never had this idea that there are problems that are unsolvable problems. She said, there wasn't such a concept in my house. Every problem is solvable. That's the way Rabbi Sacks, there's no such thing as something that was unsolvable. All problems could be fixed. The world can be a great place, and there's no such thing as to give in to say things are impossible. Everything is possible. So Rabbi Sacks here says the explanation is simple. What is the explanation? That Hashem promised Abraham and Sarah two things. I should say Hashem promised Abraham. What are the two things that Hashem promised him? Promised him children and Israel. Rise, walk in the land throughout it, its length and breadth, for I will give it to you. It's repeated no less than 7 times. Promise for children. Abraham's descendants will be a great nation. As many as the dust of the earth, stars in the sky. He will be the father not of one nation, but of many nations. So we've got this promise for 7 times, the other promise 4 times. Now, Sarah died, and yet, what does Abraham have? He doesn't have an inch of land in Israel or anywhere else, but mainly Israel, who Hashem promised him he's going to have the land of Israel. And what does he have for children? He's got a child who's not married. So what type of big nation is Hashem talking about? And that is the reason why these are the 2 main stories in this parsha. The 2 main stories are the story of purchasing a plot of land and the story of finding a wife for Isaac. These are the 2 main, this is the main theme of the story. In other words, that's exactly what we are getting at, is what about all those promises Hashem made Abraham Where did they go? Why don't we find anything happening? And that's the purpose of this parsha, is to explain where those promises went. What's happening with those promises? Hashem spoke about them so many times. How are they going to become real? And so the purchase of the land and finding a wife for Isaac, the Torah slows down the speed of the narrative as it speeds up the action, so that we will not miss the point. That's the way Rabbi Sacks words it. That we're slowing down the narrative. We're having a lot of elaboration on it and speeding up the action. In this way, we're going to catch on to what's the main point here. And Rabbi Sacks has an innovative idea. He says, God promises, but we have to act. God promised Abraham the land, but he had to buy the first field. God promised Abraham many descendants, but Abraham had to ensure that his son was married. And he had to ensure that his son was married to a woman who would share the life of the covenant, so that Abraham would have, as we say today, Jewish grandchildren. So what Rabbi Sacks is saying is that Hashem promised Abraham the land of Israel, but Abraham has to buy the first piece. Now, to me, I must say, yeah.
Rabbi Smith, can I take devil's advocate for a second?
If you want, that's normally my job, but okay.
So if Hashem promises Abraham the land and he has Emunah, why does he have to buy anything to get additional rights?
I'm not 100% sure I agree with this either. It's definitely an interesting thought. Hashem promised Abraham the land of Israel. Why does Abraham have to buy a piece of land in order to make the promise come true? Now, there is an idea that we find throughout the prophets and stories of Yiddishkeit where you do have to create a vessel for Hashem's blessings. Like, for example, if Hashem promises you wealth, you need to still work, and your work is going to be very successful. But if Hashem promises you wealth and you say, you know what, I am stopping to go to work because Hashem promised me wealth, that I understand is foolish, because Hashem promised you wealth through your work. In other words, you're a construction guy, and you're going to get a nice big job to build a huge museum or some some palace for one of the kings, and you're going to be able to become very wealthy, not from going to sleep. Your work is going to be successful. That's what it means. Hashem promises you wealth. That makes sense. Hashem promises you many children. You're going to have to go on dates if you want to be able to have children. You need to have a wife. You can't get pregnant yourself. A man can't, at least for a man. And he's going to have a wife. If he wants to have a lot of children, he's going to have to spend some time going on dates and choose a wife. And it's, if he wants to, Hashem promises a lot of children, but it's got to be, the blessing has to manifest itself in some physical way. And he's got to make he's got to make the vessel for it. But I see this very different. Here, Hashem promised him the land of Israel. He's waiting. He's there. He's not running away from getting the land of Israel. God didn't promise him he's getting it if he buys it. God promised him he's getting it. Doesn't have to buy it. he has to be around to receive it, whatever it is. Either someone there who owns it is going to be giving him the land. Somehow he's going to, but he's got to he's got to do something to be able to be in the right place at the right time for him to get it. However, that's going to happen. Either he's going to have an army and he's going to be successful at conquering the land, or however it's going to come to him. You know, that's true. But I don't know that by him purchasing it, was he really obligated to purchase it in order to be able to get the blessing, to flow? Does he really need to purchase this first piece of land? Rabbi Sacks sees it as, you got to do something if you want to, you have to take the first step, which is a true concept, taking the first step. But I don't know if I see it so clearly here. Before I answer your question, Miranda, I will just give one example that there is a discussion from the Lubavitcher Rebbe about the story of Purim, where Esther fasts for 3 days, and then she goes and prays and begs God for mercy, and then she goes to the king, and she's hoping that the king will have mercy on her and not kill her, and agree to come to an affair, to come to an event with her, and come to her party. So she's trying to win over the king. She wants the king to be excited over her. And normally, if you just walk into the king's palace, he could easily just say, you walked in without permission, it's over. And she's going to be risking her life now. And what did she do? She fasted for 3 days, and that makes sense spiritually. To fast for 3 days, is quite a spiritual. I'm sure she reached some spiritual heights by doing such a righteous act, and praying to God and begging God for mercy. But think about how the king is going to look at her. She's going to look a wreck. Imagine how we look after 1 day of fasting. She's going to look a wreck. And how is the king going to? Oh, my wife, oh, my queen, I'm so excited. Oh, he's not going to say that. He's going to say, oh, look at that ugly person. Get her out of here. Goodbye. Off with her head. He did that to his first wife. So what type of how smart was it for her to fast for 3 days? And the Rebbe explains that we have an obligation to make a vessel physically for blessing, but you don't have to go overboard. So for example, if Hashem promises you wealth, it doesn't mean you have to work 22 hours every day and sleep 2 hours a night, because God promised you wealth and you need to make a good vessel for that wealth. So go, make a crazy vessel 22 hours a day. Oh, for sure, now I made the right vessel for the wealth. No, you don't have to do that. You have to make a small vessel. Hashem promised you wealth. It's going to happen. Just make your little, your tiny vessel. That's good enough. All she had to do was go to the king. She made a vessel. What's her vessel? She's inviting the king to a party. And that was good enough to fulfill her need to make a little vessel, that this vessel will develop into salvation for the Jewish people. And she did it, and it worked. She came to the king. He said, yeah, sure, I'll come to your party. And sure enough, he came to the party, and they came to the next party the next night. And miraculously, the Jewish people were saved. Everything worked out so perfectly and beautifully. And that we'll save for the story for the holiday of Purim. But the idea is that she made a vessel. Was it a big vessel? No, she didn't make a perfect vessel for the blessing of God to manifest itself, for God's, salvation to make. She made a small vessel, the vessel that she went to the king unannounced to be able to invite him. And that was, that was basically her vessel. She made these parties. That was her vessel. And yes, she looked a wreck. So she didn't make a good vessel, but she made a vessel for God's blessing to manifest itself. Same thing applies in our, in other situations. You have to make a little vessel. So God promised the land of Israel is going to be given to you. Okay, I'll get the land of Israel. Let me meet up with people who own the land of Israel. I'll schmooze with them. Let me see how it's going to do, how the blessing is going to manifest itself, that I'm going to ultimately be given the land of Israel. Maybe I'll hang around there and I'll be the first one. They're going to die and I'm going to grab it. However it's going to happen, I'll make a little vessel to be around. I have to be around people in order to get the land of Israel. Somehow, somehow it's going to be given to me. Let me at least stay there. I'll be around, I'll be in there. But to what extent is he had to buy a piece of land, and that somehow is going to be like the vessel to own the whole land? Like how is that? How does that work? So that's really, so Manny is asking a similar question. And Miranda, what would you like to say?
Well, what I was thinking about was with Abraham's life, he always, every step he took, he had to do something extraordinary. He had to leave first his father, etc., etc. Then he had to do the Brit Mala, and then he had to sacrifice Isaac, but didn't sacrifice him. And it's kind of like there's some kind of pattern being set up here that culminates into him being really righteous and really because he's setting like a like a role model in some way for everyone else, because everyone else was like pagans and didn't have that. Does that make sense? I don't have it fully developed, obviously.
So what you're emphasizing is that it's about how Abraham was developing his levels of going up the ladder of righteousness. Is that what you're saying? And so somehow that's where the Torah portion is beginning, with where he's heading. Is it
he's like showing his deservedness as the first patriarch, showing his and his I don't know if it's the trust, because if he trusted, maybe he wouldn't pay, but the payment has to do with something else, I think. I'm not sure about that, but I do see there's some kind of pattern going on that seems to be happening.
Right.
I can't really totally verbalize it yet. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, that definitely sounds like, along the lines of something, something good is brewing over there. For sure. It says that he was by Yomim, Abraham Zakin. He was old and he was coming in his days. So he was, according to the commentaries, it means he every day was filled with righteousness. So you're definitely on the right path. That each day he accomplished something that was necessary, and he filled his days completely. Like he never had a day that was missing anything. So that's the commentaries do mention that, and it's on this week's parsha. So definitely correct what you're developing. Okay, any other thoughts on this? You see, in a certain sense, the Torah portion does seem to emphasize this idea that I like this connection that Rabbi Sacks makes, that Abraham was promised the land, and here in the Torah portion, we are actually seeing that it's materializing. It just seems hard to believe that it's about the fact that he has to purchase the first, in order to make the blessing materialize, he's got to purchase it. On the other hand, maybe there is a way to understand this, that it's not in order to make the blessing materialize, but this is what God is offering him, that you're going to get the land. How are you getting it? You are going to have to sometimes fight for it. You're sometimes going to have to buy it. It is about that idea that you are going to have to be involved. And maybe, that to me sounds along the lines of what Rabbi Sacks is saying, but not that you have to make the first purchase in order for the blessing to be expressed. I just see it as this is part of owning the land, that Hashem is promising him, I'm going to give you money. Don't worry, the money is coming from me anyway. So I've given you everything that you have. You've become wealthy, Abraham. This is this is what the money is for, to fulfill this promise. You're going to be able to buy the land. It's a huge piece of land. You're not going to be able to, to buy it. I guess the plan is not that you're going to go from house to house buying up pieces of land, but you're ultimately getting the land. But it'll come through different avenues. And the first avenue is through purchase, and everything has fallen into place. Sarah died. You need a piece of land. You're gonna buy this piece of land. So in a certain sense, it's sort of what Hashem is telling him along the lines of what Rabbi Sacks is saying. You're gonna have to you're gonna have to involve yourself. And when I promise you the land, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're just being handed it. You might have to buy it. Of course, who's the money coming from? Coming from our banker, Hashem. But so that to me fits a little better. It just changes, the slightly the way Rabbi Sacks puts it. But I just see it a little more understood that way. Okay, let's continue.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I'm sorry, before you get involved in another piece, I was a couple minutes late. How does Avram know which piece of land to buy? Because the caves were supposedly the entrance to the Garden of Eden where Adam and Eve are, and how does he know exactly where to go to buy the piece he wants?
That's a good question. There's a midrashic story about this. Rabbi Olensky, David, would you like to share with us how Abraham smelled the smell of Gan Eden, Adam and Eve? Are you familiar with that story?
Yeah, but it's hard for me to speak a little bit. Yeah.
So basically, Abraham knew that Adam and Eve were buried in that cave, even though no one else knew it, because Abraham was led there and he was able to smell this great smell of Gan Eden. So he knew this was the piece of land to buy. So I believe that answers your question. It's a very nice medrash. I just don't know all the details. But you could probably find it online. So let me conclude with Rabbi Sacks's discussion here. So how is Abraham going to have these promises completed? Abraham has to ensure that his son gets married in order to have this family that Hashem promised him. A great nation, as many of the dust of the earth, the stars in the sky. So how is he having it? Abraham has to, of course, make sure. Now, Rabbi Sacks mentions that Hashem does not and will not do it alone. By the very act of self-limitation, the way Hashem creates space for human freedom, he says. So Hashem gives us the ability to fulfill our part. We have our responsibilities. And just like Hashem told Noah about the flood, and he saved them from the flood, but Noah had to build the ark. And he gave us the land of Israel, but we had to fight battles. So Hashem gives us the strength, but we have to do the deed. So it's not what Hashem does for us, it's what we do for Hashem. That's what makes our destiny, and that's what changes the world. And that's the way leaders are supposed to be. Why Abraham became the first Jewish leader. Leaders take responsibility for making Hashem's purposes fulfilled. They have to be active, not passive. Even in old age, Abraham is actively allowing Hashem's promise to be fulfilled, creating conditions for it to be fulfilled, that what I call a vessel for Hashem's blessing. And we also find, and this is interesting, that Abraham remarries at this age, and he has 8 more children. which explains why Abraham is the father of all nations, of many nations, excuse me. And it conveys the point that Abraham stayed young just like Moses stayed young. So Rabbi Sacks concludes that perhaps the most important point of the Parsha is that these big promises, they become real through our beginnings. And everything comes, what is that? One step at a time. Oh, I guess it's myself. The sound. I'm going to mute everything. Let's see. Okay, good. So there is no miraculous shortcut, Rabbi Sacks says, and you got to take one step at a time. And if you don't, if you try to cut corners, then you'll be just like Jonah's little tree that grew overnight, and then it died overnight. Avram acquired a single field and one son who would continue the covenant, but he didn't complain. He died serene and satisfied because he had begun and he allowed future generations to build on top of what he started. And all the tremendous change, it comes more than one, takes more than one generation. You don't always see the fruit of your labor. You have to see the destination, begin the journey and leave behind for those to continue it. And that is enough to make your life immortal. And that's how Rabbi Sacks concludes. So anyway, it's a very interesting insight from Rabbi Sacks. And I think it gives us a whole picture of, you know, the emphasis, the purpose of this parsha, emphasizing the promises of Hashem and how we have to make our vessel, and Hashem's promises have to be developed, and we have to, in a certain sense, you know, do our part to make them real. If anyone would like to share any thoughts on this, you are welcome to.